Hello everyone, I'm Janine Kakmar with PHTV Channel 4 Palos Heights, back with our show all about books. As many of you know, on this show we talk about books and writing, and then we have a special guest with us. And today we have author, conservation and nature photographer Mike McDonald will be with us. He's going to talk about his book, My Journey into the Wilds of Chicago. So Mike, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
Mike is going to be the feature presenter at the Nature and Arts Festival coming up in Palos Heights on Saturday, April 28th from 11 to 3. Lake Catherine and the Palos Heights Public Library have teamed up to bring this, the Nature and Arts Festival to the community on April 28th. It's a festival celebrating arts in the community. It's an event for all ages. We'll have a performance by the Illinois Philharmonic Orchestra. We'll have a demonstration on wild edibles and a tasting as well. You'll learn how to use natural elements in your interior design. And we'll have Mike McDonald here, who will give a multimedia presentation on nature in and about Chicago based on his incredibly beautiful book, My Journey into the Wilds of Chicago. And there'll also be a storybook trail, there'll be story times for kids. We'll also have nature-based activities featuring art, music, and writing. So be sure to save the date, Saturday, April 28th, for the Nature and Arts Festival coming up in Palos Heights. That's April 28th from 11 to 3. And if you want more information on it, you can contact Lake Catherine or the Palos Heights Library. But before we get to visit with our guest and before we get to talk about other things, we're going to talk about books. Now, we're going to talk about the new releases coming out in March. And again, we can't talk about all of them, but we're going to just highlight some of the ones that are getting some attention this month. We'll start right off with our first title, The Punishment She Deserves by Elizabeth George. Elizabeth George is a British author, #1 best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, and she returns with the 20th book in her mystery series featuring Detective Sergeant Barbara Havers and Detective Inspector Thomas Lindley. Many of you might remember them from the PBS series a few years back. Some of her earlier books were made into a mini-series on PBS. But this 20th book, you find Havers and Lindley back together again, forced to confront their past as they try to solve a crime that threatens to tear the fabric apart of a cozy historical medieval village in England. This book is both a page-turner and also a complex story that takes a look at the lies that we tell, the lies that we believe, and our need for redemption. And this book has been reviewed as one of her best. So she's had 20 books in this series, and this is supposed to be her best. It's going to be a good one. So our next new release title is Alternate Side by Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist and journalist Anna Quindlen. For those of you not familiar with her, she's written 9 novels, nonfiction, self-help, all of those on the bestsellers list. And in her new book, she talks about the tensions in a tight-knit neighborhood and in a seemingly happy marriage that are exposed by an unexpected act of violence. This is a provocative novel about money, class, and self-discovery. And from the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Miller's Valley and Still Life with Breadcrumbs. Our next new release is titled To Die But Once by award-winning bestselling author Jacqueline Winspear. Now, Jacqueline Winspear writes the Maisie Dobbs series, and this is the 14th book in that series. And I know many of you remember me talking about her book that came out last year, in This Grave Hour. You know, the author talked about how when she was growing up, when she was a young girl growing up in England, her grandfather was severely wounded and shell-shocked in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, and it had a great effect on her, a significant effect on her. And when she started to write the book, her series, she didn't intend to write a war novel. But this is what was the backdrop of her stories when Maisie Dobbs began. The series began in World War I when Maisie was a nurse. Now, as the series has progressed to the 14th book, Maisie is now a London investigator and a psychologist. And she's still investigating cases. And in her new book, it takes place in 1940, and Maisie is investigating the disappearance of an apprentice craftsman who was hired in secret by the government. and they don't know if the London Underground is involved, but you're going to have to read and find out. So, but you know, if you haven't read any of her books, start with the first one while you're waiting for this new one to come out. And they're quick reads, and she develops really great characters you end up caring for a lot. It takes a little bit of a talent. One of our other most anticipated books of 2018 is The House of Broken Angels by award-winning author Luis Alberto Urrea. This author actually is semi-local. He lives in Naperville with his family, and he's a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He's also a Pulitzer Prize finalist for one of his other books that he's written. And in his new one, he writes a powerful and an unforgettable portrait of one Mexican-American family that reminds us of what it means to live, to be the first generation, to live two lives across one border. His book is reviewed to team with, it's a brilliant and humorous and authentic story about this family, and it just really shows his talent as being a class 1 storyteller. So check that one out. Our final new release for March is The Flight Attendant by Chris Bohjalian. Now Chris is a big-time New York Times bestseller author. He's written 20 books, including Sandcastle Girls, a very good book, Midwives, The Night Strangers, The Light of the Ruins. These are all standalone books. He does not write a series, so you can pick up any of his books and read them, and you'll be all right. His books have been translated into over 30 languages, and 3 of them have been made into movies. And in his new book, a flight attendant who's on a layover had a drinking and blacked out, and she wakes up in a Dubai hotel room, a stranger's hotel room in Dubai, to find the stranger dead. Okay, but because of her blackout, she doesn't remember what happens, so she flees. But it doesn't take long before the murder catches up with her. The FBI agents are catching up with her, and the Russian spies who do not want to leave any loose ends. The author has a great talent of creating very unique characters. So, and in this book, the suspense builds and builds, and the ending is reviewed to be quite a jaw dropper. So, you might want to check this one out as well. So those are some of our new releases coming out in March, and we'll talk a little bit about the New York Times bestsellers that are coming out as well. Now, of course, these are the big-time authors. Many of you are very familiar with these names. Clive Cussler, he's out with the newest in his Pneumophile series, The Rising Sea. Jude Deveraux is out with her heartfelt tale, As You Wish. Brad Meltzer has another thriller, The Escape Artist. And Linda Howard is out with her newest romance thriller, The Woman Left Behind. And then we have from neuroscientist and author Lisa Genova, who wrote Still Alice a few years back. She's out with her powerful, heartbreaking story titled Every Note Played. We have Steve Berry out with the latest Cotton Malone series, the thriller The Bishop's Pawn. C.J. Box, for those of you, I know many of you love him out there. He has another Joe Pickett book out titled The Disappeared. And Donna Leone fans, she comes out every year, once a year with her new books. This is it in March. The newest of the Commissario Guido Brunetti mystery series. It's the 27th in the series, titled The Temptation of Forgiveness. So there you have it, our books, the new releases coming out in March, some of the New York Times bestsellers. And now we get a chance to visit with our guest, Mike McDonald. Thank you for being so patient and listening. I want to get his introduction out there. I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to miss a thing. Mike is an internationally published professional nature and conservation photographer, and he specializes in the rich nature and the wild landscapes in the Chicago area. His photos have been published extensively in Chicago Wilderness and Outdoor Photographer magazine and the BBC Gardens Illustrated magazine. So again, Mike, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're going to be looking at a slide of his book, and you have to, I'm telling you folks, this book is absolutely an incredible, beautiful book, Mike.
Thanks.
The photos are spectacular. It's not just, it's a photographic essay of sorts, but it's also, you do a lot of writing in there.
Yes.
There's even some poetry, so we actually get a little bit of your personal interpretation of your photographs that you take and of your view of nature itself.
Yes.
So let me back up a little bit. And just how did you get started on this? Because it really is quite, it had to be an incredible adventure for you to do this book.
When Chicago Wilderness Magazine, as you mentioned, they went under like 8 years ago or something, and I had been publishing there extensively. And they were really selling nature to the choir, and I always wanted to help people, regular people, understand what nature really is and learn about biodiversity and all the beauty we have around here.
Okay.
And so when they went under, I realized who's going to carry the baton. And I'm going to change the market. I'm going to go to the people, not the people in the choir. So I decided also I was turning 50. And I said, you know what, I'm not dying with like thousands of pictures in my file cabinet and in my computer. So when the book finally came out, there's 22 years worth of photography in the book.
Wow.
And 5 years worth of writing and publishing and all that. And so as I was writing it, one day I was thinking about like who would actually write the book, because what's the topic going to be? I didn't want to. I'm not doing this book to show off. I got lots of pictures that. The reason the magazine published it because it was editorial, but also very beautiful. So there's stories in these pictures that go deeper than just, oh, that's pretty. Lots of plant relationships and habitats and things like that. The story of these various homes, you know, like different habitats. And so when Chicago Wilderness went away and I took this on, I didn't know how it would be written. Would it sound magazine-like? Would it be like reporting? Would it be like, you know, I didn't know that. So I was looking for a writer, and I was giving my talk, My Journey to the Wilds of Chicago, which is going to be coming in April at the event. And someone at the end said, so Mike, when did you become a philosopher? And I thought, so on my way home, I'm thinking, like, you know how we can't see the savannah from the trees? And so and I'm driving home, I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm doing this book, I'm writing this book. And because I had some really interesting takes on things. And so I went home and I just started to write things, and it just kind of happened. And you know, so that's why. And so now, but I didn't want it. I wanted it to be a more personal journey, a connection with people, but also describe. But I didn't want it to be a book. It's not about photography. Yes, photography comes up a lot, as you know, but not in a way you would think.
No, it's definitely. You for those of you who will see it, and you've come out on April 28th to see Mike, because he will be showing the individual photographs, and you're doing a multimedia presentation on the book. The photographs are absolutely incredible. So, you know, not only do you're taking us on a journey of the wilds around Chicago. So you're in areas. You're in Illinois, you're in northern parts of Chicago, you're in the southern parts, in Palos Hills.
Yeah, around here a lot.
Saganashkee Slough and McGinnis Slough, I think, is on
Spears Woods.
Spears Woods. Also, you get into Indiana Dunes, you get to Sherrillville, to some of the state parks over there. So, you know, you give us an area where, if any of you are interested in looking at these, you could actually take this book and go see the places that you've seen. The shots that you get, though, I have to say, are really incredible. And I think I mentioned this to you in our conversation prior to this, that, you know, all the time, like when I watch, you know, Planet Earth or those beautifully, you know, videographed series on TV, I always wonder, how do they get that shot when the shark just came up there, or when the bird came down and did this? And you talk about some of the ways you got some of your shots. I mean, some of you have panoramic views.
Yeah.
You have very up-close ones of the little bee coming out, or the one of my favorites is the morning dew on a
Meadowhawk dragonfly.
Dragonfly, right? Yeah, well, yeah, Meadowhawk dragonfly. It's incredible, and I mean, I don't know how you do that. And even there's one of a butterfly and I'm sure you have very advanced cameras you're using, but the butterfly, it looks like one in another photo is just still, but it's in the air, you know, it's flying, but it's completely still.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
So there's close-ups, there's panoramic views, there's all seasons. So what were some of the challenges that you had in making this book, you know, and putting this book together?
Well, luckily, I spent 20-something years taking pictures already.
Very good.
So now I have content.
There you go.
Now I just got to drop them in, but you have a lot more than you need. And so here was the thing with Chicago Wilderness Magazine. They would show lots of close-ups on the cover of bugs and bees and butterflies and all this really cute stuff and fuzzy and furry things,
Yeah.
feather and fur. But they didn't have as many pictures as I would have hoped of Chicago wilderness. In other words, like, where was the Chicago in these pictures? And there's more protected natural area within a 50-mile distance from downtown than 35 of the 59 national parks.
Is that right?
Yes.
How is that? What is it? The parks? Different?
Different nature preserves.
Okay.
And this will blow your mind, there are more native plant species than any national park. Any. Including within a 50-mile drive, not even a drive, just a crow fly's distance, there are 1,708 native species in the region, and the highest national park is the Grand Canyon at 1544. We cream them.
Wow.
We have so many different habitats because of how the glaciers came in and carved out the region. And left behind all these odd habitats that lots of places don't have, like fens and pans, and a habitat is defined as it has to have its own unique species. In other words, it has to have a species unique to that habitat. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's not a habitat. It's just a place.
Okay.
It's just your garden that you threw a bunch of stuff in.
Okay.
So when as a photographer, I was trying to tell the story of these places. So I celebrate homes of these places, communities.
Okay.
And so I do occasionally take close-ups. And so, but when I was putting the book together, I would just think of the stories, and I didn't know all the stories because I just said, remember, and I was driving home and I said, okay, I'm doing the book. So I had to figure out what stories I was actually going to do. And so my wife said, Mike, just go out there and shoot and let these things come to you. And so also, I'm very gregarious and interactive, and the performance, by the way, is called My Journey into the Wilds of Chicago, which is based on a talk I've been given for like 15 years.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, duh, it's like, you can't see it. It's right in front of you.
Yeah.
It's written on your forehead, but you can't see it, right?
Right.
And so the idea is that, I just slowly thought about, and I'd say things to people, and I go, oh, that's a story. But I just have to flesh it out more. And so I have stories about the smells of nature in the book. I really delve into winter.
Is that with the skunk plant that you
The
had?
skunk, well, there's something called skunk cabbage, and there's a poem about it actually called Searching for Spring. In fact, yesterday, which was February 27th, there was skunk cabbage popping up in Chicago in Pilcher Park and Black Partridge Woods in Lamont. And that's the first plant to sprout in the spring, which means, by the way, spring is officially here according to nature.
I saw a robin yesterday too. Hey, not far away, folks.
So what I did was I just went through, looked at my pictures and looked at the stories and tried to put them together, and I had just a bunch of choices. And then I had to realize, I realized that the book wasn't just going to be the way I designed it, because since I published it, I could do what I wanted. Instead of just having, like, how you have like a magazine that'll have like all the text, and then you'll drop in a photo and it says like see photo 1 or whatever. I just said, no, I'm going to do a short essay, so to speak, like and maybe up to 1,500 words max, sometimes just a few hundred. And then the pictures, kind of with their longer captions, will continue the story and further flesh it out. It's a real different way, because I just thought that's the way I should do it. So you'll read my captions. The average caption length, because I'm nerdy, 65 words, which is really long. Some are 300 and some are, I don't think there's a caption shorter than 15, 20 words.
No, the story, your view of your feelings and the views of nature definitely come through. And, and there's even poetry, like we mentioned in here. And that's an interesting touch as well, because it's transposed on top of the incredible photograph that you're talking about.
But it's faded, right?
Yes, that's just a great touch. But and then in the book you talk about this blind that you had to create.
The plumbing supplies. It's really nice. I sewed the thing by hand. It's nice.
I mean, but you'll see some of the photos. I mean, were you actually submerged in water at times?
Well,
or laying down in the snow. I know you said that at one point.
Well, that time,
to get the mushrooms.
It's always, bad on the knees a little bit. If you can imagine the water being about 2 feet high, and then it's often muddy, and so you kneel.
Okay.
In there, so now you're shorter. So what I say is, when I'm in my blind, I am half the man I used to be.
Yeah, right.
And the blind floats on the water.
Okay.
So if the blind,
So you can move it?
well, sort of, yeah, it floats on the water. It's not much. It just has like a fat thing of pipe insulation at the bottom. I calculated out because I have a physics degree, so it's easy like to figure. It's really simple, just a density thing. And what happens is when I'm in there, think about it. You have this thing that's maybe 3 feet, 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall. You can adjust the height, but the thing is, and you have the lens poking out this sleeve. The problem with that is you're kind of tied up, and you have the tripod in the water, in the mud. So when you have to move, you have to go, like, undo that. And man, I'm telling you, it's in there because you want it to be.
Yeah.
But it's like real, like the suction. So you get that out, and then the lens weighs like the lens and the tripod and everything might weigh like 15 pounds when you're all
Really?
done. Yeah, well, kids, it's even though it's considered light,
Yeah.
So now you have to lift it, and kind of like what I do is I sort of shuffle on my knees, shuffle, and I'm kind of pushing the blind along, just kind of bumping it along. But the problem is, I write about this in the book, when you're in the blind and you see the water like rippling around you in your little circular container, it looks like you're going the other way, like when you're in traffic. When you're in traffic and you're kind of, how you're zoning out and you're stuck in traffic, and a car, you see your peripheral vision pass you and you think you're going backwards? Oh, I get lost in my blind and I almost fall.
So you're blind and you're blind.
I'm actually blind. I almost have to when I'm shuffling, I have to look through the mesh in the blind into the distance so I don't topple over because I get totally disoriented.
So when you're taking, when you're, easing up on nature and then you see the egret or the heron or whatever you're taking a photograph, do you know when you take the picture that this is the picture?
Very good question, because forget about the animal shots. Well, you could include those. They're easier because you're only dealing with one blob in the middle-ish. When you're doing a landscape, you have millions, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of plants all saying, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me.
Yeah.
And it's that combination of things. And so how I do it is I have a way of putting feelings on film, emotion on emulsion, and senses on the sensor. And it's about creating, like listening to my heart and knowing that it's working. Now, it took a lot of experience. And now I can just look through the camera and set up a shot on the tripod, and I know it's working. But back in the day, you weren't exactly, in the beginning, you're just learning that process.
Yeah.
So now I can pretty much set it up and know it's happening.
So what,
there.
out of those phenomena, you said there was a time frame. I mean, you took those pictures over several years. What was your most challenging one?
I think what makes photography so challenging, let me just speak of it generally, because
Sure.
No, because this works really well. Okay, you know how we have these snowfalls, and we may have one tonight where you might have the snow clinging to all the trees. You never know.
Beautiful.
And then it freezes, but hopefully the sun comes out the next day, and then it's all glorious. So you go out there, and where you see wildflowers as far as you can see, or you see like the snow on the trees. I call that, and I'd like this to be a word, by the way, hyperventilatingly beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm out there going.
Well, that one photo is that beautiful. That was the snow covered. Every branch is covered.
Every branch.
Was that in Spears
Black
Woods?
Partridge Woods.
Yeah,
well, that's Spears Woods as well. Yeah, there's a couple shots in there.
Yeah,
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. And so get this. I walk into a preserve. Imagine the snow. Imagine the flowers. And I am anxious because I really want to get the shot. And I am so, and I just kind of be a little bit Zen-like, because people wouldn't think of me this way because I have lots of energy, right? But really, they say like, okay, I say, okay, Mike, you've done this before 1,000 times. Just do it one more. You can do this. But what I do, I kind of be at one with the place. The problem is every time I aim the camera at something that I think will work, in my head that's junk. Because when 3 dimensions collapses into 2 and you lose, there are a lot of problems that occur. And you also, lots of problems. And so I teach classes on this. So the point is, but to get into, if you want to know, take my classes, Creative Eye workshops, that kind of thing. But the problem is, so everywhere I aim the camera, except maybe one place, is that perfect moment. So it's extremely hard when I'm there because it's so frustrating. Everywhere I aim the camera, it's junk on the sensor or the film. And so
how do you make it so incredible then?
Feelings.
Okay.
So when every place is different too, or every moment's different. If I would approach a scene from a different, just from the opposite direction on a trail, I would see it differently. And in doing so, you kind of have a certain amount of like, I'm like a pattern recognition system. I'm like searching for intelligent life in the universe. Like all my radars are set when I'm out there. And I'm just sort of taking it all in. And when I hold the camera up, I just don't dismiss it, what's there. I dismiss it, but I do know what's wrong, or what needs to be done, or what needs not to be there. And so then I look around for that scenario without that thing or with that thing, and then I'll hone it down. So I'll be looking throughout the scene for combinations of things that over time, like I've been assessing the clues. Every time I hold up the camera, there's a clue.
Yeah. I mean, I feel
so every shot is really hard.
Yeah, well, like when I'm on vacation, or I have, I whip out my cell phone to take a picture. It's like, oh, didn't look like that in real life. It's like it was so much better.
Yeah, that's because people think that all they need to do is frame the stuff that they see. It goes well beyond framing that.
What I need to do.
Well, it's like it's about, like I say, putting your feelings on film. Less is always more when you're taking a picture. You want to keep honing in. Like, you know how you're looking at my face right now, but you're not noticing all the stuff behind me. Now, that's because everything you put your attention on, like a flower, becomes a cutout figure. But if I would just say, hey, look at my ring, you see it as a hinge? My ring is hinged. Pretty cool. Well, that becomes your world when I say that. But when you take a picture, the world, you aren't zooming in. You're just taking a picture of the wider scene. You're not just taking a picture of my ring. In other words, there's something I call the optical eye and the mind's eye. Your mind does a super focus, even though your field of view is extremely wide.
So we want to keep it wider?
You want to keep it narrower.
Oh, narrower.
You want to narrow the view.
I got to take notes here.
It's a complex thing. We could do a whole show on this sometime. But but it's a complex thing. And so I've developed these ideas over time that you can't find in books.
Yeah. I mean, you speak very caringly of nature. Have you always had this connection with nature?
I think what happened was when I started to I don't know, in a way, no. But when I started, here's what happens. I sign my books a lot. To learn about nature is to fall in love with nature. And when you stop for a moment and take the picture, you're forced to stop and kind of create this relationship with it. You're forming a relationship with it. And then you ask when you take the picture, what the heck's that plant? And what's this? And then you learn. And then you slow down. And then it's when you stop just for a moment and just breathe and take it in and maybe bend down a little and just smell the purple prairie clover, which smells like carrots and lemons at once. And just take that all in. You can't help but kind of connect with it.
And how they all live so beautifully together. I mean, that's like, and it's an inspiration in its own.
Right, exactly.
I was, I'm always curious also, like, when you, being somebody who, loves photography and nature both at the same time, can you enjoy the view when you're out there, or are you too busy trying to get the shot?
Here's what's interesting. One day I was wandering through, the mind's eye, optical eye I was telling you about? The mind's eye is where you're taking in all this information with your eyes visually, but you're honing it in just for a moment. You're like focusing, like laser beam. Where the camera only has an optical eye. It sees everything. It doesn't hone in unless you zoom in, unless you know you need to do that. One day I was wandering through scouting in the middle of the day when the light is pretty much terrible, all harsh, Bluff Spring Fen and Elgin. And there were all the prairie clover like I just mentioned, and I was walking through quickly, and I realized, Mike, you're a different person in the mornings. Like, you are completely a different person. Here, now, it's not as beautiful as you normally perceive it. Because I'm kind of racing through, and I realize I got that optical eye, mind's eye thing, because in the morning I get closer and tighter and more intimately, and there's a propinquity with nature and nearness, but also, and so it's sort of like I realize that, like, I can be both. I could be the guy just wandering through in a hurry, or I can be the guy looking at it as a photographer. So you could turn that on and off.
Yeah.
But when I'm ready to take it, or when I think that way, I see the world differently. I see the light.
Interesting. Yeah. You traveled to the dunes, and to Indiana and all around Chicago, and you talk about that at the beginning of the book. Do you have a favorite?
I'm a polygamist, I must admit.
Okay.
I love them all for different reasons. You know, they're all, you know, they're sort of all family, and some touch your heart a little more than others. I would say, if I were to suggest to folks where they can go, if you really want an experience every single day of the year, then a little bit of a drive to Zion, Illinois Beach Nature Preserve is wonderful. Okay, but
Why do you say why?
Because there's so many different habitats, and you have the beach, and it's more wild, and they have more, like 600 and something native plant species right there in that nature preserve.
Okay.
There's oak savanna and sand prairie and beach, and you see turtles, and you see, you know, like coyote, and you know, you see all these rare plants and too.
Okay.
But also, then you have Spears Woods here.
Okay.
It was my first. That's
Really?
the first preserve in my book, and I actually write Spears Woods was my first love, and it's over. But if there was like a 91st Street, it would be like 91st and LaGrange Road, and the prairie in there is beautiful, and it has different habitats. It has woodland. It also has like a wetland that should be renamed Hogwash Slough.
Yeah.
And I joke about that in the book. The point is that that's a really beautiful place to visit, because when you're going through there, you just, the landscape changes with hills and everything else. So that's a real nice place to go as well. So there's lots of places you could go to.
Great. Well, if all of you out there are interested in hearing more about Mike's incredible book and seeing it, he's going to be again at the Nature and Arts Festival on April 28th at Lake Catherine from 11 to 3. He will actually be presenting his book at 2 o'clock. And you will also be on hand beforehand to be signing books and selling your books.
Right.
Mike, you also have a website. Where can people go to find out more information about you?
ChicagoNature.com is the website for my work.
Okay.
And there is also a website called ChicagoNatureNow.com. And I report every week during the growing season between mid-April and mid-September, a national park blooming event happening during that time.
Great.
Yeah, because we have so many native
What is
plants.
that? What's that say?
ChicagoNatureNow.com.
All right. Keep that in mind. I want to look that.
Yeah,
keep
definitely
an
look
eye
that
on
up.
So thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Mike, thanks again for being here. We hope to see you at the Nature and Arts Festival so you can see a lot more, hear a lot more about what Mike has done to make this incredibly beautiful book. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.